Hey Mike, you got any sighting reports?
Yeah, we had a very interesting occurrence lately. Um, let's see, it's interesting because we had three different witnesses over a stretch of just a couple of months, all within a very small radius. Um, First of all, we had a woman come in who told us that she and her daughter were driving on Quail Hollow Road. That's about 4 miles from the museum, in a very wooded area, in a little valley where there's lots of quarries and meadows and marshes and watershed land and this kind of stuff. And she claimed that she saw an adult with a juvenile pressed up against it that was about hip high. The two of these were pressed up against a tree that was just a step off the main road there. And they claimed they caught it in the headlights and actually saw it as they drove past. They were real close at that point. And her daughter saw it too. And so they stopped immediately and tried to reposition the car so they could hit it with the headlights full on to get a clear view of it. And by that time it had gone down over the edge of the road and was down into Quail Hollow Park. So that was the first story. And that event supposedly took place in April of this year, just a few months back. And so the lady came in, in July. Yeah, she came in July, and actually she had told me that story in a real quick flash as she ran in and out of this place around the time it happened. But then she came back, and it wasn't until July to really come in and spend some time with me on it. And we went with her to the spot, and eventually we'll post that online. We have an interview with her telling the whole story of where she saw it and all this kind of stuff. And we went there and looked, and sure enough, if you cross the road, there's a hill, a fairly steep hill, sand hill that goes up, and on the other side of that hill there's a quarry, and that quarry butts up against a ridge where a man saw one in 1998 walking in broad daylight right along the top of the ridge. That was actually our first episode ever reported to the museum of a local Sasquatch, right in that same vicinity. So we went and we looked on the side of the hill, and sure enough, there's an indication of a bipedal animal coming down the steep sand hill, stepping on loose leaves and then sliding as a result of hitting those leaves. And there's these slide marks and stops, and several of them as this thing negotiated the hillside, along with the smaller one. Then they crossed the road. Apparently the car lights hit it from a distance right about the time it got to the far side of the road, and then I think it instinctively pushed itself up against a tree and stood still. You know, because they hide in plain sight like that all the time, just by being still. And but she had already seen it from a distance, and so they looked right at it as they drove by. So that story made a lot of sense. It seemed to be, you know, as good as any, right? You have eyewitnesses, they show you things, the things make sense. You find some corroborating evidence, you know. So that was the first story of the year of a local coming in with a fresh sighting. And then a short time after that, I got an email. And the email stated, hi there, I've just moved from Los Angeles up into your area. I live in Ben Lomond on Newell Creek in a little neighborhood. Well, interestingly enough, she moved into a neighborhood where back in the 1970s people were discussing the Ben Lomond dump monster, or the dump dweller. This is the county landfill. At that time it was an open landfill, and so you could root around in other people's garbage if you liked. And everybody used to do that. They would get into each other's dump stuff. But about 20 years or so ago, they capped that off, and now there's a redemption center there where they ball it up and send it out of the county. So the Bigfoot can't go through the garbage directly anymore in this county at that dump site. But that dump site is conveniently right below the man-made lake known as Loch Lomond. And Newell Creek comes from that lake and goes into this neighborhood, and then connects up with Zayante Creek and the San Lorenzo River eventually. And that's what this watershed's all about. Everything centers on that and eventually ends up at the San Lorenzo. So these things are coming down off the mountain above Loch Lomond and traveling through the dump, and they used to be able to go in there and get their hunger satisfied, and now they can't, and so now they're coming down and going up on the back porches. And we have all these sightings from the last few years that are just recent sightings that are indicating them looking for food sources right up on porches and in people's backyards. And so this woman said she just moved to that area, and so what happened? She was awakened at 2:30 in the morning by a scream. And she managed to record this scream on her iPod or whatever, her iPhone, and she sent me a file, and I listened to it and compared it to the screams we've recorded over there, and it matches nicely. She apparently got a recording of a howler over near the dump that people have talked about for years, and we've recorded it numerous times now, more than once. So that was pretty exciting.
So you got the scream?
Yeah, here's the an enhanced version of the file that the lady sent me. We just made it so you can hear it better is all. When I say enhanced, we just boosted it. This is an interesting area. Ralph and I have been over there in the middle of the night doing some recording and listening, and we've heard a number of screams very similar to this. We've recorded them at other times. Also, we've heard some interesting owls in this area too. Owls that sounded quite large and that seemed to be moving from place to place between calls. And then, 6 weeks ago now, I think it was, 2 men came in. One of them is one of our newest members. He's a he's an old Army guy. He's retired, and he's disabled because of action. And he had a friend with him, also a disabled man, a former member of the armed forces. And the two of them came in together, and the new member, Mike, brought his friend along, and they asked, well, what's been the most recent sighting? And so I told them about those 2 events I just told you about. And so they said, oh, great. Well, so then they took off. Next thing I know, about 3 hours later, about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I get a call, and it's Mike on his cell phone, and he says, Mike, we just went over to Quail Hollow Park, and we went into the park, and my friend saw a Bigfoot in the marsh just less than an hour ago. So it took us about half an hour or so to get the museum closed up and everybody out of here and everything turned off and locked up. We were out there within an hour, and we scoured the place for 2 hours, and we did indeed find a heel print and what might have been a track, about a 15-inch track or so, 16-inch track, but it was just not for sure. The foot detail was minimal. The heel was real clear, but that's it. But what we found was a trail of marsh grass that was all stomped down flat, and it's it's grass that's growing up 3 and 4 feet tall. It's about this wide at the bottom, and it'll slice you up if you're not careful. And I'll tell you what, when you go and you step on it, it just goes down and covers the ground and covers the marsh, because you're walking over this fairly soft mud. But there's no foot impression because of this marsh grass being in the way. So we went there to investigate, and he told us the thing was right there behind him. He sat down, didn't even notice it, and then it made a noise, and he got up and looked, and there it was within 12 feet of him. And then he turned around the Bigfoot, that is, and headed into the marsh. And so when we got there, here's this obvious trail of something going into the marsh with all the grass flattened out. And so we took off after it. And here, when we went to Quail Hollow, when the man claimed he saw the one in the marsh, and we followed up, and we went around the whole edge of the tree line, and I discovered this. You can see my feet there, size 9 shoe. That's a pretty good sized poop, and there's several of them actually. There's a little bit of one here, a little bit there, and there's another cluster nearby. And you know, at first glance it looks like a cow pie. It's kind of that consistency, or apparently is, but there are no cows in that area. So I don't know how many indigenous animals that I'm aware of in Quail Hollow could leave a poop that size. So we took a good sized chunk of that, and we have it in the freezer in the back, and we're going to have it tested. So it's a plausible report, and so there's 3 of them in a row, all within about 2 square miles of each other. All 3 of these sightings.